Hi everybody, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Hallmark Plus More, where we watch and talk about shows, movies, mysteries, Hallmark ornaments, and anything else that floats our boat. So today I'm going to be reviewing Matlock Season 1, Episode 10, starring Kathy Bates as Maddie Matlock. So before I get into the review, I just want to say thank you to everybody who watches, likes, subscribes to my channel, comments. I appreciate you so much, so thank you for doing that. So getting into this episode, they kind of show a flashback or kind of like a preview before, and it's about Olympia and Jillian. They kind of made this bet, right? Whoever the board picks as partner, the other person is going to leave. However, Olympia has gotten really close with Maddie, so she has made it as part of that arrangement that if she loses and Jillian wins, that he has to keep Matlock on. So, I mean, Olympia's like, don't worry, your job is secured. You're still going to be with the big pharma. So I thought that was nice. And you can kind of see Maddie was surprised. I think this happened last episode. And she's like, I take care of my friends. So, even in the last episode, you kind of see them bonding where they're at the bar drinking. And of course, there's always that, idea, epiphany, where, they think of something that involves a case. But we did find out a lot of information with that girl drinking, kind of, getting to be girlfriends, so to speak, and really just kind of having a girls' night out at the bar. You find out how she started in the firm, right? That she was just a junior lawyer, just kind of learning and working long hours. So you find out information, really, that she kind of worked her way up, which I kind of assumed anyways, but you find out that's where she met Jillian. So you find a little bit about her history, because we never really know. We just know that, Senior runs it, and Jillian and Olympia, they're like the three senior lawyers. So you kind of find out how it all started. And you also find out Shay, the human lie detector, was also on the Braxton case. So a little bit more information to kind of help Maddie, because remember, her whole, reason for being at that law firm is to find out, who signed the paperwork, and who covered it up. So, I think it's kind of clouding the water there with her and Olympia. You even saw that scene with Edwin, her husband, last episode. Like, you're getting too close with Olympia. She's not your friend. One of these three people did it. And she kind of said, I don't really have the proof, but Olympia's my friend. I feel it in my gut that it's not her. It must have been Jillian. Jillian forged the signature. So she's really kind of using this friendship and closeness that she's been having with Olympia to kind of single her out of the equation and say, okay, it has to be Senior. It must be Jillian that forged it. Now I'm going to go strictly after him. So, I like Maddie. I think Kathy Bates is doing a great job with her. So I think, she does have good instincts. However, I'm not yet ready to say if that's a good move. I love Olympia. If you've seen my videos, you see I love Olympia. She's one of my favorite characters. And I like that she was getting back together with Jillian. Now, obviously, knowing that he cheated on her, I still like them as a couple, but that's going to be difficult to get over. So that's a little bump in the road. So I'm not really sure how that's going to play out. But I like all of the characters in there, except Senior. Senior, I don't know, he just rubbed me the wrong way. And it looks like they're kind of painting him as the villain anyways. But you find out the person he cheated on was Shay, which they all work with. So that even makes it more awkward. It's, you're kind of trying to get back together with your ex. And right when you think they're kind of getting back together, you find out he cheated, and now he's cheated with somebody that you've worked closely with and him and still do occasionally. So that's, added on awkward, not just that he cheated, but that, we know who it was. And Maddie knows because she planted that pin in Jillian's office, which is definitely going to come into play today. And what I thought was interesting in this episode was it was almost like two cases, right? You see this older gentleman, which I feel like we've seen before, so forgive me if he doesn't ring a bell right away. He looked familiar. I think he was from a previous case, but he's an older gentleman, so I feel like he resonated with Maddie, as most older senior citizens, when we see these cases, they kind of can relate to Maddie. So I feel like, he was coming to her and knows that she works there and needed help. He was being evicted. But he said, it seemed a little bogus, right? Like his neighbor wanted to buy his apartment. He always turns his TV off before he goes to bed, and somehow it's blaring, and he calls a noise infraction, on him with the board for the apartment, and they're trying to evict him. And he apparently lost his clicker, his remote control 6 months ago. So when he told me that, I'm like, yeah, that's like, kind of common sense to me. If you lost your clicker 6 months ago, it's an apartment. They're close. They probably have thin walls. It's probably the neighbor or somebody, changing his volume up to get him these violations. But he seems like a really nice guy. He's coming to Maddie for help. He doesn't have anywhere else to go. And they're trying to evict him. So that's kind of a side case to the main case, which is a gentleman named Walter who died in a nursing home. So they have nurses that do checks like every 2 hours or 4 hours. And they found out the nurse skipped one of the checks. So now Olympia is trying to get an expert witness on the time of death, because if he died because the nurse didn't do that check, then, the nursing home is liable. So they're trying to prove that he died some other way. I mean, you really don't want to blame somebody for their own death, but they just want to see if there's any other possibilities. So again, Maddie comes into play. So I feel like this has two cases going. One, the main case with Olympia, and she's relying on her staff, Sarah, Billy, and Maddie, to help with the nursing home. And then another side case that really came to Maddie and was like, I need help. So then Maddie kind of spearheads that with Billy and Sarah. He asks Olympia, and Olympia basically, or they ask Olympia, and Olympia basically says Maddie can decide who takes point on the case. So then Billy and Sarah are both telling Maddie why they'd be better. So, like I say, a lot going on in this episode, because you're kind of going back and forth between the two cases. And then, of course, you have this pen that they're tracking, which you find out there's a gentleman in the office who lost their wife, and they have like a sympathy bereavement card, and that's the pen that the assistant picked up in Jillian's office. So now everybody in the office is using this pen to sign the bereavement card. So Maddie's worried, right? Is anybody going to notice it's a tracking pen? So that's kind of all going on. So there's a lot going on in this episode. Since I mentioned the pen, I'll just go through those real quick. So it turns out, the pen gets back to Olympia, and so Maddie's like, great, I can take it from Olympia. And then Billy notices that it's a tracking device. So he sticks it in her coffee, and he's like, we got to figure out who this is. Maddie goes home and says, I paid for it in cash. Nobody's going to figure it out. And then Alfie's like, well, I had to attach an email address to it. So so that makes Maddie like, oh no, what are we going to do? So then she's trying to figure out like how to get the pen back, right? But Olympia sends it to Billy, gives it to Billy, and is like, you have your cop friends, get your cop friends to track it and figure out who it is. So she's asking Maddie before she gives it to Billy, and Maddie totally plays on this whole Jillian Olympia battle. So Maddie's like, it was probably Jillian who did the listening device, probably wanted to see what was going on, since they're kind of in this battle on who's going to be partner, and now, dealing with the kids and everything, because they're obviously not getting together. So Maddie was able to kind of land Olympia down that road. And then Olympia admits that one time he did record her conversation, because I guess they were having a heated argument. In marriage, it happens, and he wanted her to listen to herself. Her tone is what she said. So she totally bought into it. She's like, yeah, it probably was, because he recorded me once before. And Maddie was a little relieved to kind of give it on somebody else. So that's all going through, and that kind of, you find that out at the end. But the issue with the reason why I say the two side stories was interesting, because he, Audrey, I think his name is, he came to talk to Maddie. So she goes to Billy and Sarah and says, hey, how can we help him? He's being told today he has to be evicted by tomorrow. So what can we do, like, now? And Sarah does research and says, hey, they have to give you 2 weeks notice. So go back, tell them they didn't give it to you, and that at least will delay you 2 weeks, right? And then we can figure out how to keep you there, right? So you're like, okay, well, that's, that at least gives them 2 weeks. And then you focus on the other case. Well, he comes back, and he's like, he shoots him a little, like, paper airplane, and they're like, did you get the 2 weeks? And he's like, oh yeah, I got the delay. And he's like, so what's the matter? He goes, well, I guess they saw my happy dance that I got the 2 week delay, and they decided to to evict me on the spot. And Sarah and Bill are like, they can't do that, not in writing. And he's like, well, that's what I just, shot at you with the paper airplane, and they had evicted him in writing. So that was kind of like, okay, well, now how are we going to help him? And when he's in the office telling them, like, I got all happy and they evicted me on the spot, he's seeing the board with the nursing home case with Walter, who died in the middle of the night. And, they're trying to figure out what was going on in his life. Maddie went undercover at the nursing home to try to, get in with the residents and find out if he had a girlfriend, if he was on the little blue pill, which is Viagra. And, in nursing homes, a lot of people do that. So that's what they're saying. If maybe he was on Viagra, maybe he was visiting our girlfriend that he had in the nursing home, that could have interfered with the medication. So that's kind of what they're trying to find out. So when Audrey walked in to tell him that he was evicted, he sees all of the pictures, and he's like, oh, I know that nursing home. I've seen that. You can put that black tape or black marking over the door sensor, and it allows you to get around without the nursings knowing. And he's like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I was an electrician. Like, that's my expertise. So the side case helped, the main case with Olympia. And I don't want to say side case, because his case is very important. Anytime you're being evicted or have to move, it's a serious deal. So I don't want to downplay his situation. I just mean on the show, the main case is always the one Olympia or Jillian, the head, one of the head lawyers is spearheading. So I don't want to say it's a side case, because it's a very important case, but that case, actually helped the main case with Olympia, because you never see Olympia get involved with Audrey's case at all. Audrey even tells Matlock, like, you pick who takes point. And there's a scene in the nursing home. They're going to investigate, the main case with Walter passing, and Sarah goes and Billy goes, because they need to occupy the girlfriend, so Maddie can get in the girlfriend's room and see if there's anything proving he was on Viagra or anything at all. She finds the ring that he was wearing that was accused of the staff stealing after he died. So, we know the girlfriend was there that night. So it did help. But while they were there was a moment where a woman was coming up to Sarah and Maddie, and you could tell she was kind of dementia, or just really didn't know where she was, but she was getting agitated. And Sarah just says, yeah, I can help you. It's right down here. And she just, like, I don't want to say changed her personality, but she just kind of, was a different person. And she starts singing, and I know we've heard her sing in past episodes, but she's got a great voice. I love to listen to her sing. And she just starts singing to her, and the woman, and she's walking away with woman, and you actually see at one point where the woman kind of puts her head on her shoulder, like she's comfortable with Sarah, because she's singing to her and helping her. And you're like, okay, Sarah obviously had somebody in her family that went through that, right? So she has a heart to heart with Maddie afterwards. And, Maddie's like, hey, if you can show that compassion to Audrey, I think you can, spare your case, and get people to like you, because you have to be able to get people on your side. And Audrey doesn't really like you, which most people don't, because Sarah is pretty tough. I like Sarah, but, she isn't the great with people skills, right? Billy is more people skills person. So, Billy obviously wasn't happy about that. Sarah was. And then I know I told you with the tracking of the pen, Maddie convinces Olympia it was Julian, and then he gives it to Billy. It says, Billy, your cop friends, figure out who's tracking the pen. So Maddie, like I told you earlier, she's frantic. So she goes looking in Billy's desk. Billy catches her, and so Maddie makes up a story like, I was finding a Post-it note. You're gonna spearhead the Audrey case. I'll have to go tell Sarah. So that was her cover up, was to say, in all reality, she was looking for the pen, right? So there's some friction there, because she had that heart to heart with Sarah, told her she could do the case, and now she has to kind of pivot and kind of like redirect, come up with the story on why she's at Billy's desk, and now Billy's doing the case. Which I have to say, at the end of the episode, which was really interesting, was you see Olympia in court in the Walter case, because they found, evidence against the girlfriend, and then you see Billy 2 seconds later in court in the Audrey case, trying to, tell him that, you can't evict him. Like, obviously he lost his remote, his clicker, somebody is turning it up, and he found proof. They're thin walls, you know what I mean? Because the apartment complex was like, why don't you just go live with your daughter in Queens? And that's why he was like, okay, Audrey doesn't like the people of the board. He thinks they're snooty, and I agree with him. But that's when Billy's like, how did he know? Did you talk to him? And he was like, of course I don't talk to those, snooty people. And so he realized, the neighbor with the thin walls heard him on the phone with his daughter, stole his remote, turning the volume up at night so that he can get the noise violations, and then told, them, like, because he wanted to buy the apartment. So, Billy was able to say, okay, how did you know his daughter lived in Queens? Because the neighbor told you with the thin walls, who also stole the remote, who made the TV really loud at night to make the noise violations, all because he wanted the apartment. You can't do that. So I love the way Billy kind of put it all together. I mean, I kind of assumed that early on, but it's still nice to see them kind of like hit all of the points in court. I always love a good lawyer, putting somebody in place, getting the justice. I love that. I love drama, crime drama shows, because, I like to see justice being served. Typically, I know in the real world, a lot of the bad guys get off. There's crooked cops, there's crooked lawyers, but it's nice to kind of see when it works, when justice is served and it's not the bad guys winning. So seeing Billy, I thought was great. I was like, yay, go Billy, you did great. You won your case, you did great in court. So that was nice, right? Because, you don't see Billy and Sarah spearhead a case like that. And even Sarah with the nursing home, she still did great, because I like the way the two cases kind of intertwined a little bit. Even though they were there to get evidence on Olympia's case, she saw that softer side of Sarah, and that allowed her to say, I'm going to put you in charge. So, and then him helping, knowing the markings, so they knew that him and his girlfriend were getting out unnoticed. And then Olympia winning her case, because this was a sad case too. It was sad what Billy was defending, that they were going to evict this old man. I'm so glad he won, because he shouldn't be evicted. So I'm really glad. It's sad that had to be done, but I'm glad they were able to keep him in his apartment. And then Olympia's case, the girlfriend was slowly giving him like arsenic poisoning, I think in their tea. They had tea every night on the patio. And basically, I don't know if he was in pain physically or if she meant emotionally and like mental illness, but basically he wanted to commit suicide, just, slowly. So like she would stay with him every day, and he was slowly kind of poisoning himself. And then that night, he wanted his girlfriend there. And she even said, I held his hand for hours after he passed. I couldn't let go. So you can tell that they had like a love. And she even said at the end, like, if I were to do it again, I would do it again. I mean, he wanted this. He was in pain. I was there with him. He said I could have his ring. That's why I had his ring. So she had an explanation for everything, but I was surprised. I thought, Olympia, you see out the evidence, like you're going to nail the girlfriend for killing him for whatever reason. And then you find out he kind of did it to himself, and she assisted him, but, he was well aware of it. Like, you know what I mean? And that's hard to watch because we all have loved ones, or we're of that age ourselves where we're looking into that. And, I have family members that are in pain, mentally, physically, emotionally. It's not always, like they have cancer and, I've seen that in my family too, but sometimes, dementia, Alzheimer's, some of these diseases can really be hard to watch a family member go through. And so, I don't really have, a stance on whether I think that's okay or whether I think it's not okay. I just think it's sad, if somebody feels like they have to come to that. We've seen so many famous people, at the, have all the fame, have all the glory, have all the money, and they still, aren't happy. Robin Williams comes to mind. I think he's a hilarious comedian, and that just breaks my heart every time thinking that, he wasn't happy and he did that. So it's just sad to see that. I mean, I'm glad Olympia was able to win her case, but, you see the girlfriend crying because she knew what was happening. So definitely a different kind of take on this episode. I liked how it was a little different. But still kind of sad in the end. Did they get justice? Did they find the reason? Yes, in both cases. But it's still sad because somebody still lost their life. And the family members are there suing the nursing home. And it's like sometimes people don't feel comfortable talking to their family members about their, mental health or what's going on. But it's just sad. I just think it's sad when people feel like they have nobody to talk to. Because you have to be able to talk to somebody. Life's too short, it's too lonely to be alone. So the other part of this that I was mentioning was the tracking of the pen, right? So Maddie being Maddie, this show being this show. I always say in the last 5 minutes, I'm like, wow, Maddie, go Maddie. Something always happens and I'm always like nervous for her, like, oh, they're going to find out. They're going to find out who she is. Something's going to happen, right? And towards the end, you see the pen. Well, before I get into what happens with the tracking of the pen, let's just talk about Sarah for a minute. I told you in this episode you saw a really soft side of her. You saw how she comforted the woman in the nursing home, sang to her, kind of distracted her while Maddie could go get in the girlfriend's room. So you're like, okay, there's a story behind that, obviously. Sarah didn't like being around old people in a nursing homes, and yet she goes and she changes. So Maddie, immediately goes to her later and says, who in your family had dementia? Like, obviously, this is personal and I want to know. So she had that heart to heart with Maddie, which was really sad to hear the story that your family members don't recognize you when you have all these memories of them. So there was a very touching moment with Sarah. And then you get a total 180 at the end of the episode. Sarah threatens her, basically. Maddie goes, yeah, Sarah, I'm really sorry. I know you're upset. I'm sorry I took it away from you and gave it to Billy. But Billy did great. He won the case. He did great. And I actually am going to quote her because it was so kind of scary for a moment. So Maddie apologizes and says, I'm sorry. And Sarah says, you will be, because you will regret making an enemy out of me. So I think Maddie was taken back because she's saying sorry and Sarah says, you will be. And then Maddie's like, what? Because you will regret making an enemy out of me. And then she has this evil look and walks away. So I'm like, okay, holy crap. We're going to see that Sarah has some wrath, right? Because she was typical Sarah at the beginning, standoffish, kind of rude to everybody, not realizing people's feelings. Then you see that softer side of her at the nursing home. And then at the end of the show, you see that evil side where she basically flat out threatens Maddie. And you're just kind of taken back by it. Like, I know she'd be mad, but she was like downright evil look. Olympia had a really nice moment with Elijah, which I like. I think Elijah was a great guy. I was okay with an Olympia and Elijah relationship. I wanted her to get back with Julian, but I liked Elijah because I felt like he was just a good guy. Like, I didn't think he was just like a, one night stand or was gonna, abuse her or be mean to her. I was like, if she gets with Elijah, he's gonna treat her right. And I think that's why I liked him. I just think he's a really good guy. I'm sorry they didn't get together, even though I kind of, obviously like a husband and wife to work it out. It doesn't always work that way, but it looks like she's trying to patch stuff up with Elijah. And like I said, he's a good guy, so he's not gonna like be rude to her. And she kind of says, hey, I just hope we can be friends again. I'm not going to ask you to do me any favors. And I think Elijah, as Olympia's walking out, Elijah was like, okay, we can try to rebuild this friendship. So I definitely liked that moment. And then when they get home, and before Maddie gets home and talks to her husband Edwin, you find out about the pen, right? So it turns out when she was looking in the desk drawer with Billy, before Billy interrupted her, because remember I was telling you, she had to give the case to Billy because she had to come up with a reason why she was snooping around at Billy's desk. She actually found the track pen and switched it. They bought another pen, made a bogus email address, and switched it. So they are not going to get in trouble. So when Billy's cop friends look into it, it's going to be somebody else's email. So Maddie was able to recover the pen with the tracking device that would lead back to her. So in typical last 5 minutes Matlock form, you find out, oh no, don't worry, Maddie it always covers her tracks. I just think she plays such a good role in the show. She's amazing. She has me thinking and worried for every episode, and then at the end I'm like, yeah, you go girl, you got it. So that's what I love about the show too. And there was another sad moment at the end when she's talking to Edwin, like what's going to happen to Alfie if we pass. She's like, we're taking good care of ourselves. And then you kind of they talk, maybe we should look up Alfie's dad, and they're like, well, he's probably an addict too, since that's what happened with our daughter. So that was kind of a heartfelt moment. That it's kind of like that moment where you talk to your spouse about getting a will. Like, it's not something you want to talk about. You don't want to talk about your funeral, you don't want to talk about having a will, but it's things that you kind of, as an responsible adult, have to talk about. They have a young grandson, they're getting older, they need to have something in place. So that was kind of, I know that was hard for them to talk about, but them being responsible, it was like, okay, so are we going to explore that? Looking into Alfie's dad and seeing what's going on there. And then Olympia calls, she's still mad about the whole Julian thing, and says, I'm going to do a forensic accounting. I'm going to look at every single thing that Julian did. And so, of course, like, Maddie's smiling. She has him on speaker. Edwin's smiling because that's what they wanted all along. If Maddie thinks it's Julian and he gets this, forensic accounting, they're going to go through everything with the fine-tooth comb, and she's going to hopefully find the information she wants. So they really ended the episode well. But like I say, when they see that preview for next week, Sarah's out for blood. Like, she's investigating Maddie. So next week is definitely going to be interesting because it's one of those things where, like, they're nice until you cross them. It's almost like a mama bear thing with Sarah. Like, she just crossed over. I'm a nice person, but if you mess with my family, you're going to see a different side of me. I feel like Sarah just went like 180 on Maddie. So definitely excited for next week. I hope you liked my review. I know there was a lot going on. So until next time, I will see you then. Bye.